Sony's recent run of remasters and remakes has taken them in a rather unexpected direction from a few years ago. They are seemingly very intent on remastering an awful lot of PlayStation 4 exclusives, even though they're still very playable on the current generation. And this month's release of the Until Dawn remake is one of those surprises. Remade for PlayStation 5 and PC, there's a big jump forward in terms of graphical detail, but what else is new and different here? Supermassive's 2015 original release kicked that company into a narrative horror streak, with the Dark Pictures anthology following it, but they haven't returned for this remake, and Sony has instead handed the game over to Ballistic Moon. The whole game has been rebuilt within Unreal Engine 5, as opposed to reusing Guerrilla Games' Decima engine, which was the basis for the original and is now best known for games like Horizon Forbidden West and Death Stranding. However, even with this shift in game engine, this is still a generally very faithful recreation. The story remains the same, as a cast of young, beautiful characters are trapped on a snowy mountain, which just so happens to also have spooky mines, a sanatorium, and something very nasty lurking in the woods. You play as all of the characters in turn, making decisions that radiate out in a butterfly effect, where what might seem like a simple decision in the game may have a drastic impact later on, so much so that you might not even get to play large sections of the game if a character dies early on in your playthrough. You also have the exact same cast of characters and actors, preserved as they looked and sounded in 2015, because Ballistic Moon has been able to reuse all of that performance capture from the original game, using that as the framework for all of the cutscenes, the exploration and action that they've been recreating. Of course, with Unreal Engine 5 and the current generation of console and PC hardware, Until Dawn can look absolutely fantastic. Honestly, the 2015 original still holds up, but there is definitely a big bump in texture detail, character models, some facial animation improvements, and more sprinkled throughout. There's some really refined and subtle tweaking being done here, though because you're still using the original capture, you can still sometimes see the same edges to the ends of animations and that uncanny valley of motion at times. As they've gone about it though, they've also chosen to make some further tweaks and revamps to the game. The game's prologue, for example, features a very different kitchen layout to the original when you first get to have direct control of your character, and it also puts you in direct control much more often, has some very different camera shots and a real shift in tone and more.
Two hearts with accurate
This leads into the opening chapters where you meet all of the characters, which is now set at dusk instead of at night, which might not make a whole lot of sense for the location and the time of the year, but it does really help to emphasize the whole you've got to survive one night vibe of the story, and it helps to provide a bit more visual variety. In general, this game's visual direction takes a step away from the very bluish hues of the original as well. Alongside the new visuals, there's a whole new soundtrack, which is a little bit more baffling, we'll be honest. The original recording of Oh Death is gone for the opening credits, and there's a new score from Mark Corvin. It's strange when the soundtrack by Jason Graves is so well liked, and there also wouldn't have been any of the kind of licensing issues that so often see soundtracks and remasters and remakes completely revamped. While the vast majority of the story remains the same, there have also been some additions and restorations. What was once a pre-order bonus featuring Matt and Emily is now incorporated early on, and there are some new endings to hunt down as well. Given the branching narrative though, it will probably be quite difficult to spot where some of these story additions come, unless you played the original a dozen times through, or are sat down and trying to follow a decision flowchart. And so we come to perhaps the biggest shift in game design, going from the fixed cameras of the original to the third-person camera of this remake. Instead of always having a fixed camera to go around, similar to classic horror games like Resident Evils 1 through 3, Until Dawn's remake has got a third-person camera incorporated. Sometimes, that is. Basically, it's whenever you have a free exploration moment and there's still a lot of directed camera shots where you don't have control over the camera, through those quick-time event sequences and cutscenes in general. It's even at certain points where you're in control of the character's movement, like a few moments where you're exiting the mines for the first time. so the game can flick back and forth between camera styles, and it can be a little bit odd. This shift does change how it feels to explore the setting though. The developers can't hide secret paths and areas in the same way, so finding all of those premonition totems is a little bit easier perhaps.
Finally, a little ray of hope.
Oh, and those totems now have a small puzzle to move it around and find a particular spot to focus on, using the DualSense haptics and audiovisual cues to help you get there. Disappointingly, there's a smattering of technical issues at the moment, like juddering FMV cinematics, and these will hopefully be fixed with a patch. It's just a shame that they weren't able to be fixed before launch, of course. You should head over to thesixthaxis.com for our full review, but if you're wondering whether this Until Dawn remake is a must-buy, well, probably not. Honestly, the PlayStation 4 original still looks good and holds up really well today, and it plays very well on the PlayStation 5 as well. That game also maybe has a little bit more coherence in terms of gameplay style, with everything being developer fixed or controlled cameras. Of course, this remaster does still look very good, and most importantly, it will bring it to a lot of new players for the first time, on PC in particular. And that is important when there is the Until Dawn movie that is coming up in the not too distant future. That's all that we've got for a look at Until Dawn today. I hope that you found this useful and informative, and again, head over to thesixthaxis.com for our full review. Before you go though, make sure to like, subscribe, do all of the usual things, and hopefully we will see you again soon. Goodbye!